sure, probably.
Kind of the opposite of now. Where, like, dudes kind of, I mean, at least in New York, they kind of pee wherever the hell they want. And it makes me mad every time. Because I'm like, I can't just drop trow and pee wherever I want. That's, like, extremely dangerous for me.
You can't.
And you, sir, should not be able to do that in public either.
I will say that cities like ancient Rome were not safe for women a lot of the time. So I would not think that women were necessarily peeing in public a lot. Like, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But I wouldn't guess no.
We would know if they had been taught how to write.
Right, if they'd written it down.
Totally.
Exactly.
It's not like Missoula where you could just pee on a Culligan's line and nobody cares.
Just lift a leg and just pee. That's all.
I mean, they wore relatively, like, uncomplicated clothing. It would have been pretty easy.
Well, I mean, they wore a lot of large pieces of cloth that had to be elaborately folded. I mean, it depends.
And I guess I don't know what their, like, underlayers situation was.
I know.
Like.
I was just wondering the same thing.
Jenny, tell us what underwear they wore. We need to know everything.
You know what's actually really interesting? Again, this isn't an area that I necessarily have done a giant deep dive, but from what I understand, women did wear underwear that we would recognize today. There's this show called Rome on HBO that shows a woman wearing what looks like kind of a bikini underwear that's kind of tied with straps, like tied at the sides.
Oh, right. And I forgot that.
That's accurate, according to what we know.
Oh, interesting.
No way.
Yeah, so that's for the bottom, and for the top, they would have had kind of like a sort of a winding cloth around the boobs, from what I understand. It's there's a word for it. Oh gosh, what is it called? There's a special word.
I'm
forgetting it now.
U.S.
Strophium. It's called a strophium, I think. Or maybe that's a sweat scraper. I'm not 100% sure.
Wait, a what? A sweat scraper?
Yeah, like a thing to scrape your sweat off of your skin.
Like a sweat squeegee?
Yeah, it's like a long metal thing that's like slightly curved. It's like a blade that you scrape on your skin to scrape your sweat off.
Like for horses?
Yeah, yes, but for people.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, that was a thing.
I mean, I guess it gets very warm in Rome.
People sweat a lot. It was maybe more of a thing in ancient Greece, but I think they used it in ancient Rome too. Yeah.
Well, now we need to do a whole episode on that. I'm fascinated. But let's get back to the gender roles stuff.
Gender roles. So I was telling you guys about how they really had to know at all times who was the bottom and who was the top if there was gay sex going on.
Oh, we went way off the track.
To me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how we got here. But I think that is really interesting, though, that, like, I feel like today in the U.S., obviously attitudes are changing quite a lot, but historically speaking, just to be a man and be gay or to be a man who sleeps with men is looked down upon as inherently effeminate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that they were in a way more discriminating, but also in a way much more nosy.
Right, exactly. Like you could be a very manly gay man in ancient Rome. Not to say that like there are not gay men now that are very masculine. I'm not saying that, but this is how they saw it, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You could be gay John Wayne in ancient Rome as long as you were the top.
Wasn't John Wayne the gay John Wayne in America? Like,
was he gay?
Shit.
I don't know. Was he?
Shit.
There were rumors.
Not surprised.
That would be very interesting. I haven't heard those rumors.
Oh, I have a whole book here. I'm happy to share with you.
Oh, boy.
I'm not surprised at all. There were some people, like for women who stepped outside the gender binary, there was a special name. It was called Dux Femina, and that's a female leader. And these were, these were like, you know, higher status women who baldly seized power as opposed to operating behind the scenes with a gentle touch. There are some specific examples of this. For example, Fulvia, who was Mark Antony's wife before he met Cleopatra. She was a woman who led armies in battle.
Whoa, badass.
Oh, she was great. We did a whole episode on her. Agrippina the Younger, who was both the niece and wife of the Emperor Claudius and the mother of the Emperor Nero. And she exercised a lot of power as empress.
That explains a lot about Nero.
Yeah. Well, actually, Nero wasn't her son with Claudius. He was her son with somebody else.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's an interesting aspect. Like, if she could have a son who went on to become emperor, but he was not, but she had children with more than one man, that's a status thing, I guess.
I mean, it was a little, like, marriages were a little different. But her previous husband, I think they'd all died at that point, or I forget exactly. There were a few before Claudius. One of them had died, and there was a suspicion of poisoning. I don't remember what happened to the other one. Cleopatra was sometimes referred to as a dux femina. She obviously ruled in her own right in Egypt. Dido, the mythical queen of Carthage. So being a dux femina was seen as something women did when they were basically taking agency in their own lives and acting as men. Sometimes fighting in wars, leading in battle, leading in a political way, being out front as opposed to behind the scenes.
Yeah, those are, like, they all sound like very powerful women who really had a lot to gain or lose by stepping outside of their roles.
Yeah. And doing that was explicitly a gender nonconforming act.
Yeah. Interesting. Because it also sounds, I mean, they're the ones I know about. Now, granted, I only know about Fulvia because I have listened to your podcast, but, like, everybody knows Cleopatra.
Yeah. A lot of those women turned out to be the women that got written about, so we know more about them because they did things that men had to deal with, so men wrote it down.
I mean, I still feel like I'm hearing a lot more arguments for, like, living your life the way that you want to. From Lucretia to Cleopatra and beyond.
You mean, like, for not following the gender binary as set forth by ancient Rome?
Yeah, they sound like they suck.
Yeah, well, they did. That's because they did.
So, since we're talking about high-status women, I'm wondering, like, if the gender roles that you were expected to embody as a woman were, like, different for people of different classes. Like, was it kind of easier for someone of a higher status to get away with becoming a dux femina, or is it just that we know about them because they're the ones who got written about because they were famous?
Well, it's because one of the difficult things that I have definitely found about doing the work that I've been doing is that most of our original sources just deal with upper class rich people. They don't talk as much as you would like about the lives of, working class people who were not aristocrats, basically. Yeah. So there's a whole lot that we don't know about how people navigated gender roles at different levels of society because it just was not written about as much. Like, it doesn't come down to us. I can speculate, though.
Yeah, speculate.
Okay, I'm going to speculate. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on and just go ahead and say some half-cocked, uninformed things.
Awesome. Right there with you.
Yes. So, depending on the time period in Rome, there were points when women had the right to own property and run their own businesses. Like, they weren't always just completely sequestered out, somewhere in a room. This is a little bit less strict than it was in ancient Greece, where the standard was that you were not supposed to leave your house,
Wow.
Yeah. But even in ancient Greece, which there's a lot of crossover, ancient Rome appropriated a whole lot of things from Greece, including some stuff about their gender roles. My impression is that non-wealthy women in ancient Rome would have had to do things outside in the world because being able to divorce yourself from power, or at least agency in the outside world, is in some ways like something that you can do if you're privileged because you have money, you don't have to work for yourself, you have slaves because it's ancient Rome, so you'd probably have an enslaved workforce to do things for you. And to be fair, like, people at all levels of society had enslaved people in their houses, like in ancient Rome. Like, even if you weren't that wealthy, you might have like one, but you wouldn't have so many necessarily that you couldn't leave. You could get away with like not really leaving your house. You know, like women would have had to run businesses. They would have had to go shopping. They would have had to go outside. So my sense of things is that these gender ideals about not exercising power outside, being very submissive, being very passive, probably were, you know, less prescribed if you were not wealthy, or less followed because women just didn't have the ability to do that, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to think about that little like factoid that you kind of dropped, like not everybody, I'm sure, but most people like had a slave or two. It's just wild to think about that as a reality, like just a ho-hum everyday, oh yeah, like we have a small apartment downtown and there's just a little closet for the slave to sleep in. Like,
I know, isn't that messed up?
What?
Like,
yeah.
What the hell is this? What
right?
is happening?
I really, this is totally like a tangent. I'm not inviting us to go down this path for a long period of time, but I do think it's worth mentioning here that like colonization and empire building, as far as I can tell, has always depended upon slavery.
Yes.
Like it requires a workforce of non-paid or underpaid people to do the labor of building this thing. And I think that concept doesn't really get talked about a whole lot. And I think it's very important to understand, like, especially when it comes to Rome. But it's something that we just, I don't know, doesn't really enter into our conversations about it. Like, I don't hear people talking about slaves in Rome very often, even though they were everywhere.
Yeah, I kind of want to do a whole thing about the parallels between slavery in ancient Rome and slavery in the antebellum South. And I have, like, I don't have the experience, the like expertise of that area of American history like I would like to. Like, it's huge. It's a huge topic, but there are a lot of parallels from what I can see. Ancient Romans had these things called latifundias, which were basically industrial level agricultural plantations that were operated via slave labor. And that was what fueled the wealth of the senatorial class.
Wow. I mean, I'm not surprised, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. Especially in Julius Caesar's time, a lot of those really famous senators like Cicero and, you know, Cato and all these people like Julius Caesar, I'm sure. I don't know if Julius Caesar had a latifundia. I'm sure he had a latifundia. Everyone had some latifundias. Like, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Really messed up.
Kind of like our founding fathers.
Right. The founding fathers of ancient Rome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
Gross. I've got the I feel like I need to like shake it off.
Yeah, sometimes you're just like, I need to take a shower now.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, going back to what we're actually supposed to be talking about.
Right.
Okay,
right.
So we do have info on the upper classes, and I feel like there's probably some very juicy gossip about high-class individuals who did not always conform to the standards that they were supposed to. Like who did things that, you know, clashed with the gender roles and, you know, prescriptions on sexuality. I want to hear all the dirt.
Oh, well, I have some gossip for you, Lindsay.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yes, I've got some gossip for you both. So one of the people I really want to talk about, I'm really excited to talk about, is an emperor named Elagabalus. So Elagabalus was a child emperor of Rome. He was, his reign was from 218 to 222 AD. He was 14 when he was made emperor. I believe he was from Syria originally. We did an episode on him. We did a 2-part series on child emperors, and he appears in that.
Oh, right. Okay.
Elagabalus, he did a lot. He was completely outside the gender binary as prescribed by ancient Rome. Number one, he wore silk, which was reserved for women, very promiscuous women, by the way.
Oh.
Wearing silk was a cross-dressing move for men.
Okay, interesting.
At this time. Yeah. He slept with both men and women. Used the women's restroom in the public baths. This was a big thing, gossip thing. shaved all his body hair, which was a thing women did, according to the